good afternoon, good evening, all. It's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid, a channel I'm creating not only to just bring awareness to the day-to-day realities trauma creates, but I really want to get into the understandings around it to create meaningful pathways of healing and meaningful awareness to create the ecologies that we need to heal. Now, this is the next video in the adoption series. And I want to go back again to healing attachment and the components around the attachment from an adoption and a foster care perspective. But more so, the easiest way to explain this is from an adoption perspective. Because of what adoption creates is that very young infant placed into a family that's not biologically their own. And hold that understanding of what that implies. Because as I've said in numerous videos, the attachment style from adoption into adoptive family is a survival script. It is a survival state. It is a survival mechanism. There is no way around it. It can develop into a positive process, but more often than not, it doesn't. And even if it becomes a completely positive environment, even if the adoptive parents are aware that they're raising somebody else's non-biological child to their own, and they do all this stuff to negate some of the emotional impacts and the insecure attachments and all this stuff that is created through that removal and placement, there are still components that cannot be changed. And that's the biological components of attachment. And about 70 to 80% of our attachment process in our most intimate ways we connect is purely physiological. Any survival state form or connection is cognitive beginning. It is cognitively based. We're mentally assessing the construction of it. When we're looking at biological attachment, our body leads the way. It's a biological form of connection. And this leads me to what this video is about. And it's a very touchy subject, but it is something that needs to be raised because of what it creates. When adoptees, this is some of the chinks in the chain around the survival, attachment, and adoption. And I've seen many instances where this plays out. This is not, I've met a couple of people or I've known a few. This is a commonly large scale happening. When an adoptee has a child, that child, especially the firstborn child, that is their first connection to a biological family member. Understand that and understand its implications. The reason this understanding is so important is I've known many and I've spoken with many children of adoptees, and that has a real implication. I've observed and known of many relationships, adoptees and their romantic partners, that is altered through that process. That first bonding with the first biological member of your family changes everything. It can go one of two ways. The adoptee will either completely attach to that infant, that young child, or it will be so overwhelming that they'll create a wall. It's one or the other. As things progress, there's attempts, there's cognitive attempts and all this to try to bridge that wall and try to put into context that connection. But for those around, it's understanding that is the first biological connection experienced from a person who was removed and placed. And it's understanding that so much around the response to that connection is completely out of their control. The reason I raise this is on multiple fronts. The first is in the relationship. If the adoptee has bonded to that child, their partner feels removed because that connection is stronger than this connection. And this connection, the adoptee to the child, becomes a threat to the relationship. Now this triangle, so for an easy example of explaining, you have a male adoptee, non-adoptee wife giving birth to a daughter. The strongest components to explain this, how this plays out. So the father, the male adoptee, completely connects to his daughter. The wife feels the daughter is a threat. She doesn't have the same meaningful connection. There isn't this same bond, and she'll feel it. So one, what's wrong with her? Why can't she connect to her own child the way that the father has? There must be something wrong with her, so that's a threat. The daughter becomes a threat to their marriage or their relationship because this bond is another female that's more important than me. And these layers build. And I've seen so many relationships fail through this process, and it leaves a lasting aftermath through something that grace and understanding on all sides could find ways of resolving it and coming to the understanding and keeping it within what it actually is, not all the judgments, misinterpretations around it. I've also seen, particularly when you're looking at male adoptees and that connection to their biological child, particularly if they have the opposite sex a daughter, society loves excuse me, society loves to judge that as inappropriate. So again, that comes down to the point of what do we do with it? Then you have the other side, where the emotional connection the adoptee feels is so overwhelming that they shut down and they try not to connect, or they can't connect to their child. That is a little more common than the over-connection. It gets to this point of complete overwhelmment, so they gray. They just shut down. And I know so many children of adoptees, and when you're looking at forums and that online, there's a lot of discussions around this now. That the child feels this barrier, and as all children go, it's my fault. There's something wrong with me. And then when they become an adolescent, it's not something's wrong with me, it's something wrong with you. It affects the relationship. It alters the trajectory in the life of that child because there is no understanding around the implications of what this biological connection means. And this is one of the reasons why I created this channel, and all the years of advocacy that I've tried to create these understandings, to get them out there in the world, is people need to understand what happens when you first meet your first biological family member. What changes and what does that mean? Now, I've stepped it out in some small aspects in previous videos, and I will step it out more in as we go along in the attachment stuff around adoption and how healing and understanding. But the first instance is people need to understand what it means and what it implies. And it's something that cannot be brushed off. It's something that cannot be ignored. And its implications are lifelong. It will fundamentally change every relationship regardless of the stability of that relationship when an adoptee first meets that first member of their biological family, their child. And in most adoption cases, their first child is the first biological member that they will ever meet. And then you have the implications of where if you've got adoptees that were never told they were adopted, they have no idea why this crap is happening. That's another layer to this scenario, this experience. And yes, I am aware of where this has happened. Unfortunately, it's from the aftermath where older adult adoptees, through this understanding of what happened, know why their marriages failed and why they lost custody cases and why they were accused of inappropriate things that they never did. And that is how, more often than not, I come across these, these things that happen on the scale that they do, is when you start to unpack the aftermath of something. And what I'm trying to do with this channel is bring the awareness so that there is no aftermath. It is worked with when it can be worked with. So when you look at this, when you look at the biological nature of connection, understand the implications and give us the grace to work with it. Communication, finish the sentences, keep things in the context that it is. Let go of the threats and all these things. I'll do another video on how to work with this stuff down the road, but I want to start to lay out some of the chinks in the chain so that it gives context to the how do we work it out down the road. But keep this in the context that it is. And finish the sentence when you're going, well, this is why this is happening. This is what I'm doing. And if you don't know, say, I don't know. I don't have any understanding what's going on. And then look at common sense ways to interpret it first. And to me, it is completely common sense that if you're an adoptee and you've never had a biological connection to a biological family member, your child is your first biological connection, and that's going to change things, and that's going to be huge. You've only got to watch what happens in the reunion videos that are all over YouTube when an adoptee meets their mother or their father for the first time, or their sister or their twin. And look at that amount of emotion. And that's what happens in here. Whether we fight it or not, it's still happening in here. Bring that understanding into awareness and into the grace to process it. As always, I love your guys' comments and feedback. Please be mindful, please be safe, and I'll see you all next time.